We are fortunate this evening to have an outstanding speaker for you. Katrina Pierson is a senior advisor to Trump 2020, which is the re-election campaign for President Trump. Absolutely. Previously, Katrina was the national campaign spokesperson for the 2016 Donald J. Trump for President campaign. She's a former board member of the Dallas Tea Party. As I mentioned earlier, she's a founder of the Garland Tea Party. She ran for Congress in CD 32. The room's full of CD 32 people. She's owner of Pierson Consulting Group. She's a well-known political analyst and frequent guest on Fox News and virtually all other cable news networks. Last week, every time I turned on the television, Katrina was on it. Katrina's background is in the healthcare industry. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology from UT Dallas and currently resides in Dallas and Washington, D.C. Please welcome Katrina Pierson.
Good evening. Looks like the Tea Party is alive and well. It's like I stepped into a time warp here. I see lots of Tea Party leaders, and there's Barb, and let's see, there's Pauline, and Pastor Broden gave our prayer, and Bill Whitehill still on the ballot. So it's there you are. So it's kind of refreshing. You know, I'm delighted to be here this evening with you because there are no words to describe how refreshing it is to see so many familiar faces and to be around so many friends. So tonight I'd like to share just a few stories with you from this journey. As David mentioned, there's quite some history here in Texas. And I was so excited when David reached out and invited me to come home. And it's truly a blessing because even though it sounds so simple to come home, it's really much more complicated than that. When you spend as much time as I have in the swamp, coming home is really more like going to rehab. You get to relax and rest and recuperate and reconnect to what's really important. Because in Washington, D.C., a simple hello is really a greeting in disguise. It's more of a pretext to the next manipulative person that's trying to get you to do something that you need for them, and you actually fear saying hello in return because you might be making a deal with the devil. But as of 2016, Washington, D.C.'s had a few angels that have entered that place, and so one of the stories I'd like to share with you, I actually just stumbled upon about 2 weeks ago. And it's from an African preacher in Zimbabwe. And I really resonated with this because it was something that I felt truly early on in the 2016 cycle, and it really moved my spirit, and so I felt like sharing it with you today. And his vision went something like this. He saw himself in the desert, and he could see two people at a distance. And one of them was President Trump. The other was a woman. And he could see that this woman's behavior was irrational, confrontational. And she was shouting all kinds of profanities at President Trump. And he says, but President Trump was just standing there looking at her calmly. And suddenly, he sees President Trump bend down, pick up a handful of sand, and he raised his hand up, opened it, and blew the sand in the woman's face, blinding her. So as he proceeds to discuss his interpretation to his African congregation, he says, God's ways are not always your ways. He says, you may not want what God wants. But God does not rule based on your opinion. And he will still be God whether you like him or not, or whether you agree with him or not. And in summary, he sends a message to America. He says, America, your president is the president, but there is a spirit that has risen against him and your nation. And this spirit is Jezebel. He gave it a name. And he says, President Trump is fighting against this spirit, but God has anointed him and rose him up to deal with this demon. And he says to his African congregation that there is no other person, not one other person, other than Donald Trump, who had the courage and the might and the skill to deal with this spirit, because he fights everything that Jezebel stands for. So as he blew the sand into the woman's eyes, she went blind. And then he says, Americans should be happy, and they should pray for their president and their country, because we are under a spiritual attack. And if anyone had been chosen other than Donald Trump, in 2016, he predicted that by today our nation would have fallen. And that really resonated with me, because I didn't have some vision at all in 2016, but I was around, as you know. But I did feel a calling in January 2015 when I encouraged Donald Trump, the businessman, to run for president of the United States. And he'll tell you himself that I was the first to predict this victory. But at this time, his candidacy was just a rumor. I mean, we've all heard it, 2012, Trump's gonna run for president, and it's just a rumor. But there was something in me that said this was not a rumor this time, and I had not met him before. So when I heard this rumor floating around, I was in South Carolina at the time at the state Tea Party convention. And I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Trump, I heard you're thinking about running for president again. And he takes the deep breath and he says, well, yeah, I don't know, I'm thinking about it. And I said, oh no, Mr. Trump, you have to run. You're the only one that can win. And he says, you think so? I said, oh, Mr. Trump, I know so. I've been all over this country, 20 different states, and I have trained tens of thousands of people. I said, you have to run. And he could see, I believe at that point in time, the conviction in my eyes. And he says, well, I'm thinking about it. And I said, Mr. Trump, if you run, you will win. And you will win big, because I'm going to help you. And he laughed, and I said, I'm a Cruz girl. I was there at the time with candidate Cruz at the time. And I said, but if you run, I will back you 100%. And out of a personal and professional persuasion, I felt a courtesy to then walk over to then candidate Cruz's holding room. And I said to him and his team, I said, look, I just talked to Trump. And I told him that if he got in this race, I was going to back him. The shock. Needless to say, 6 months later, Trump entered the race. I honored my commitment, and the rest is history. But tonight, I'm not joining you as the senior advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign. I'm joining you as a woman, as a mother, as a Texan, who's been able to live the American dream. Re-electing President Trump is the greatest and most likely and possibly the final opportunity that we are going to have in our lifetime to advance conservatism, capitalism, and protect Christian values. So we must defend the gains that we have made. For those of you who don't know me in the room, like I said, I'm a Texan. I'm one of the original founders of the Tea Party movement. I'm a black Republican woman. Shh. We're not supposed to exist. I am unapologetically proud to be an American, and I enthusiastically support our president. But I'm also one of the originals of the 2016 Trump campaign, way back on the 5th floor of Trump Tower, when there was just a handful of us who helped this international, iconic businessman clinch the Republican nomination. And that makes me Donald Trump's longest serving political spokesperson. Would you all mind if I share a personal story about that? So when Mr. Trump asked me to be his national spokesperson, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I'm a single mom, my son was still in high school at the time, and I was his sole provider, and I grew up in Texas, and I honestly could not fathom having to move to New York City. Nothing against New York City, but I'm just not wired for that. Some of you know what I mean. I love my house, I love my yard, my pool, waking up to birds. I love driving my car, and I didn't really care for sirens and jackhammers at all hours of the night. So my home, was my sanctuary, and I didn't want to give that up and be surrounded by cold concrete and have to pray that my taxi didn't reek of cigarette smoke or worse. I didn't want to have to deal with strangers who couldn't be bothered to say good morning or have a nice day. I'm a Texan. So when I asked Mr. Trump, do I have to relocate to New York City? He said, no. You're the best, and I want you to represent my campaign. He looked at Corey Lewandowski and says, give her whatever she needs. And I was not denied one single resource to be successful. So we put a remote studio in my home. So I was able to go on live television any day of the week, at any point in time in the world, on every network in the world, and so I did. Today, I'm living in Washington, D.C., surrounded by cold concrete, praying that my Uber doesn't reek of cigarette smoke or worse, waking up to sirens and jackhammers every day, but I'm loving every minute of it. Because I was there when they said, oh, that Trump campaign is just a clown show. It's not real. That escalator ride, that was a publicity stunt. Maybe he's got a new book coming out. You remember. I was there when all the pundits were parroting all the doom and gloom, and they were outright giddy because Trump couldn't get above a certain percentage in the polls, and then there was racism and sexism and misogynism and any other ism you can think of, right? They threw it at us. They attempted to paint Donald Trump with such broad strokes on a canvas of nothing but division. And if you didn't know any better, you would have been hiding under your bed thinking that there was a fire-breathing monster on the loose that wanted to eat your children, identifying as a presidential candidate. But I think Americans knew better. But today is Groundhog's Day. We have the same people singing the same song, all of the same old isms, but this time they've manufactured what I think they believe is a triple threat. Russia, racism, recession. And when all that fails again, it'll go right back to impeachment. But with all that, my fellow Texans, I want to talk a little bit about some of this stuff. Because the fake news is real. And they are depending on fear because that's really all they have in their arsenal. And they can't compete, and none of the Democrats, by the way. I mean, look at this room. When a Trump surrogate can have more of a turnout than a Democrat presidential candidate, that should tell you everything you need to know. So they can't compete with him on policy or performance. So they have to fuel the flames of hoaxes and delusions and despair and, to capture all the headlines. That just creates more smoke to hide the fact that President Trump is winning for the American people. So like many of you, I'm sure that you saw a lot of what I saw. in candidate Trump at the time, someone that I agreed with on policy, and someone that was surely going to shake up Washington, D.C. And so I'll share another quick story. It was really funny early on in the transition because we had to office out of the GSA building. And you could hear all of the card-carrying DC swampers, right? Whispering in the hallways, criticizing the administration and the people that the president wanted to bring in because they didn't have mountains of government experience. So we'd have a little chuckle every time somebody would say that. We're like, Donald Trump's a businessman. He wants to run the administration like a business. And I tried to tell everyone during 2016, what you see in candidate Trump, you're going to get in President Trump. And so every day, it was kind of fun to hear all this nonsense. And, you know, there's that typical go along to get along mentality. And they basically just wanted him to continue this decades-old long theory of managing the decay of the country, right? But this is different. Trump is a big thinker. He's a doer. He's a go-getter. But he was surrounded by all of the experts who really spent all their time at length talking about all of the reasons why we can't get certain things done, why we shouldn't change some of these things, or worse, you can't do that, right? Which is not even in this president's vocabulary. So we learned very early on that expert is a term used very loosely in Washington. But we get all this from Washington, D.C. It's like amateur hour for the elitists, right? They have no idea how things work in the real world. You know, the world you and I live in, not the world that the elites live in, this imaginary place in their head. And that's why they can never figure out how to get things done. But it was the same experts that you would hear throughout 2016. Ones that I would have to sit in the green rooms with and argue with at Fox and CNN and MSNBC. Remember that economist over at MIT, the fancy guy that says, oh, if President Trump is elected, the stock market's going to crash. It's going to plunge. It's over. Even President Obama said, remember this? Oh, you'll never bring back manufacturing. You'll need a magic wand for that. Well, abracadabra, baby. 6 million new jobs, including 600,000 manufacturing jobs, have come back to the United States under the Trump administration. And did you know that out of those 6 million jobs, more than half went to women? I mean, it's crazy. You won't hear that on the news. But we have more job openings today than we do have people looking for jobs. 715,400 jobs alone created in Texas. And that includes 69,400 manufacturing jobs. 5 million people have come off of food stamps. 9,000 people have been lifted out of poverty. Now, as of late, and you've seen this on the news, all the Democrats are taking credit for this Trump economy. Even Obama said, I did that, it's my economy. So then shouldn't it be equally true that the Democrats and Obama own this narrative of the looming recession? But they don't want to own that part, do they? So President Trump has achieved the strongest overall economic growth since the start of the Great Recession, and he's made sure this time that it's shared among the middle class, especially women. With unemployment holding at a steady mid-3% range, Americans are enjoying lowest joblessness rates since 1969. Women are doing even better. achieving 3.6 unemployment rate last year, the lowest female unemployment rate since 1954. African American unemployment rate is at historic levels. Hispanics also. So I'm a working mother. I'm pretty sure there's many women in this room who are working mothers. On TV, yes, the lights are terribly bright, and it's Trump super surrogate Katrina Pierson, senior advisor to the president. But at home, I'm just mom or auntie. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps you grounded. It's the moving constantly, drive me here, take me there, pick this up. No, that's the wrong flavor. I don't want it. Take it back. Why did you buy spring rolls when you know I like zebra cakes, right? You all know. Maybe a mom likes Swiss rolls. But we don't really complain about that because our kids are our future. And we do what we do for them. And President Trump and his administration has one gear forward. And he can't stop. We cannot even keep up with him. We've actually had to create a website called promiseskept.com just to keep up with the promises that he's kept since he's been elected. And, you know, when we talk about some of these things, going back from the beginning, it's only been almost 3 years. So when you talk about job-ending Obama-era regulations, when you talk about renegotiating NAFTA, something else that we were told could never be done, scrapping the Iran nuclear deal, telling the world to take a hike with their Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Paris Climate Accord, proclaim Jerusalem as Israel capital, and move the embassy. The ISIS caliphate no longer exists, holding China accountable. And something that really doesn't get enough coverage are the 9,000 opportunity zones that will spur $100 billion investments in struggling communities that will help 35 million Americans. Bipartisan criminal justice reform. 146 federal judges and 2 Supreme Court justices. I don't want to be presumptuous, but there's going to be a third. God wills it, or 4. So just imagine what 4 more years can do for our country. And those are just some of the highlights. I just want to challenge you all to just think back for a second. Can you think of one other Republican candidate that could have accomplished half of the things that Donald Trump has been able to accomplish? The paradigm has definitely changed since then, because when you beat the Republican establishment, when you beat the Democrat establishment, when you defeat the globalist establishment, you don't make very many friends. But the political class is still alive and well, and they've been, preaching to us for decades about how we should be electing people who we deem as smarter than us, wiser than us, more accomplished than us, have more of the alphabet soup than we have ourselves, and really have convinced us over time to elect those people. Unless you're a media-approved Democrat, then of course they go to great lengths to cover up all of your transgressions, past and present. They'll cover up pictures with real anti-Semites, with real racists, and even rapists. And we don't really get that. Remember Justice Kavanaugh? High school yearbook, really? Really? But when Donald Trump came along, I think the game has changed. Love him or not, no one can deny his love for his country, his countrymen, and his flag. So when he decided to bring this $1 trillion taxpayer-funded gravy train to a halt, as you can imagine, there's a lot of people that are going to be out there trying to prevent this re-election. They have weaponized the media. We now have censorship. We have rogue government agents. We actually have political persecution in our country. It seems that even in 2016, we had to face down the devil himself when our young supporters just wanting to go to a political rally were physically and violently assaulted. But they kept coming back, and our crowds got bigger and bigger. I don't know if you've noticed, but our crowds are still growing. Because this is a movement, and if we stand together, we can restore cities, generate more wealth for the middle class, and deliver a generation of Black children from poverty. So I cannot stress to you enough that when you see your president, you are looking at the physical manifestation of Ephesians 6:11. He is the walking whole armor of God. And I can't think of any other Republican or his family that could have withstood this barrage of attacks, personally and professionally, and get stronger in the midst of it. So yes, he will continue to tweet. He will continue to criticize those who criticize him, because he will accept nothing less than success, because to him, failure is not an option. And turning your back on this country is unforgivable. So we believe that we have to give our country away because they cannot take it from us. We have constantly elected leaders over and over again, expecting a different result. So we have given away what we feel that we've lost. But all of these things can occur when good people do nothing. Your silence is consent. But you, and only you, are the cavalry. President Trump cannot do this on his own, as many people expect him to do. The media would have you believe that the Trump voter is just this faction of the Republican Party. They keep showing you this 35% baseline number, all the same stuff. But here's the reality. We have over 130 million phone numbers now. That is over 1.3 phones for every individual, every voter we need. Compared to 2016, where we had multiple voters for each phone number, this has been a growth by tens of millions. In 2020, we are going to send hundreds of millions of text messages, closing in on 1 billion text messages by the end. And these are staggering numbers, and it makes the political class, they get uneasy about it, and they shake their heads, but we're doing it. Because we cannot risk the social media platforms blocking our messages. We cannot risk big tech censoring us, shadow banning us, and preventing the truth from getting to the American people. And this is why our early start is so important. So let me give you a good idea of how this data grows. Obama's list from 2008 to 2012 grew 55%. We're already 3 times more than that. The most amazing thing is that 96% of our donors turn out to vote. That means right now we're locking in those future votes that we need. This also improves the artificial intelligence models, which informs our targets, really letting us hone in to what we need to do next, and that's win. So to help achieve that goal, the Trump campaign, combined with the RNC, has launched, by the way, the RNC is now the president's platform, which is why we've rebranded it into Trump Victory. So when you see Trump Victory, that's the RNC, the president's infrastructure. And we have launched the Trump Victory Leadership Initiative, so you'll see the TVLI acronym. You'll be seeing a lot soon. That's our grassroots training program. I wonder where that came from. The program launched in June. We've already trained tens of thousands of volunteers across the country. And by November 2020, we'll reach 2 million volunteers. Now, I was really excited this morning. I had a conference call because we get updated on all of these things, and the excitement is out there. They would plan these training events for 50 people or so. 500 would show up. So these volunteers show great promise in the training, and they'll be tapped. The good ones will be tapped to become the Trump Victory Neighborhood Team Leaders. Interesting analogy there. And these team leaders will conduct their own trainings and organize even more events in their communities. Those are our super volunteers. And according to our research, the turnout is 15% higher in the neighborhoods that have a team leader. Do you have any neighborhood coordinators in here? Raise your hand. You all need to be our team leaders. So activating this turnout through this mechanism will be key to Texas' success in 2020. And this is why we prioritized all of this development and all of this training, because there's nothing more impactful than face-to-face with a voter. It's the best way to get them registered, to persuade them, and turn them out. And that is how we are going to win in 2020. So how can you help? Well, I'm glad you asked. Take out those phones you were told to put away. I'm going to give you a number, or write it down. And I want you to send a text message to 88022. And in the body of that text message, put Trump. 88022. So if you text Trump to 88022, you will automatically be plugged in to this massive organization. We've launched the Women's Coalition. We've launched Latinos Coalition. We have the African American Coalition coming next month. We're going to have a Workers Coalition. We're going to have Veterans Coalition. And I will tell you that we are launching coalitions at an unprecedented level. Republicans alone have never invested in coalitions the way that President Trump is. I'm talking millions of dollars. We are hiring people just to run the coalitions as individual campaigns, and it has been phenomenal. I don't know if you've seen the Women's Empowerment Initiative we had, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where we deployed 15 Trump surrogates all over the country. It received so much coverage, they were writing about it in other countries. So get plugged into the system, sign up for one of the trainings in your area, and be a part of this team, because we need you to help President Trump keep America and Texas great. Thank you so much. I think I'm taking questions, David.